Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. I want to thank you for being here today as we take another very significant step forward to deal with the epidemic of gun violence that's facing Suffolk County, all of our state, and really all of our nation. I'm honored to be joined by some of my key partners in this effort to end gun violence: Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Tim Sini, and a special guest today, Suffolk County Police Officer Mark Collins. Ladies and gentlemen, as New York's top law enforcement officer, since I took office, one of my top priorities has been to curb the epidemic of gun violence that's touched the lives of far too many New York families. Every day, more than 300 Americans are shot. Every day, 90 Americans die from gun violence. And every day, 7 of those Americans are teenagers or younger. They're kids who are dying from the plague of gun violence. Now, in New York, we have taken major steps to address this issue, but the real-world effect of these statistics is all too clear, and clear here in Suffolk County. Today, we're honored to be joined by Officer Mark Collins from the Suffolk County Police Department, and he will tell you more about his story in a few minutes, but there is no doubt that this man has to be considered a hero. Last year, while on patrol, Officer Collins was shot twice, chasing down a suspect, and you can see he's doing incredibly well today, but it's important to remember every day our police officers face dangers and take extraordinary risks to protect our communities. There is one risk, however, that they should not have to take: the risk that arises only because of the flood of illegal guns into our state. The gun that shot Officer Collins was originally purchased in Virginia. It never should have been in the hands of the man who shot him, who, by the way, is serving 55 years to life in prison. But the gun that nearly took Officer Collins' life symbolizes the most challenging problem we have in dealing with the epidemic of gun violence in New York State: out-of-state guns getting into the hands of criminals in New York. To address this problem, last week my office released a report called Target on Trafficking, a first-of-its-kind, multi-year analysis by New York law enforcement of all crime guns recovered by law enforcement in the state. A little over a year ago, we began the effort to secure this data. We had to get consents of the local police departments, provide all of this information to the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and really we were looking for an answer. We loaded up the system, and it's available online to everyone at ag.ny.gov/guns. I urge you to look at the trafficking report. We loaded nearly 53,000 crime guns onto it, and we're looking for an answer to a pretty simple question. Why, with all of New York's good rules to make it hard for criminals to get guns, were so many guns finding their way into the hands of criminals? And the big answer we found was that the data demonstrated clear that the vast majority of crime guns recovered in New York come from out of state. Our research found that 74% of all guns recovered by law enforcement came from out of state, a rate more than twice the national average, and 86% of all handguns, the weapon of choice of gangs and most violent criminals, come from out of state. As you can see by the chart next to me, the numbers on Long Island virtually mirror the state average. In Suffolk and Nassau County, 73% of all guns recovered were from out of state. 85% of all handguns recovered used in crimes were from out of state, and amazingly, 97% of all likely trafficked guns recovered on Long Island were from out of state. Now, in our report, we set up a trafficking index to tell us whether or not a gun is likely to have been trafficked, and that takes into account 3 factors, all of which are now available to the public to see so they can understand the nature of the problem. And by the way, for our policymakers here and in other states to see so that they can understand the problem in enacting further laws and regulations. We look at the factor of what's the time to crime. That's how quickly, from the time of an out-of-state purchase in a gun store in North Carolina or Virginia or Pennsylvania, the gun shows up at a crime scene in New York. We look at whether the purchaser was the same as the perpetrator. So if there's a purchaser who bought a gun and then within a year some other person often with a criminal background, shows up with a gun in New York, that's a factor in whether the gun was likely trafficked. And the second is, does it cross a state line? So creating our trafficking index, we determined what are the guns that are most likely to have been trafficked. And again, I have to underline this, 97% of all likely trafficked guns recovered by law enforcement on Long Island came from a handful of states. The states that make up what is traditionally called the Iron Pipeline: Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And we've had to add in Ohio, because particularly in the western part of New York State, that's the source of some crime guns. So police departments all over New York, including the great police departments here in Suffolk County, are doing great work to try and fight this epidemic. But it is clear that it's too easy for New York criminals to get guns that are purchased in other states with lax gun laws. The question now is, what do we do about it? And the answer is clear. Our report crunches a lot of numbers. It provides interactive tools. I urge everyone to go online and look at it. But we also offered sensible, evidence-based recommendations for federal and state lawmakers. First, and this is going to be true no matter what the outcome of the election is next Tuesday, our report and our analysis makes it absolutely clear that the federal government has to require or encourage states to require universal background checks. And in New York, you cannot purchase a gun without a background check. I'm proud of the work we did to close the gun show loophole in New York, working cooperatively with New York's gun show operators. But right now, 40% of all gun sales in America don't require a background check. It's just too easy for someone with a criminal background or serious mental health problem to get a gun. Second, the federal government must make gun trafficking a crime. Believe it or not, there is no federal statute prohibiting gun trafficking. There are federal laws that prosecutors have used to go after gun traffickers, but no federal law that actually comprehensively criminalizes each stage of gun trafficking. Our own U.S. Senator, Kirsten Gillibrand, is sponsoring a bill to fix that. Congress should pass the senator's bill in the next session. Third, the governor should lift the restrictions that have been imposed by Congress on ATF that prevent us from sharing more data with institutions other than law enforcement. Policymakers really should be able to see it too, and so should the general public. As a part of our analysis, we were able to make some of the big picture trend data available to the public and the media and policymakers on our online tool. But the tool gives the people a sense of where the guns are coming from in their own community, and that's important. But our office does have access to much more detailed information, like which out-of-state gun shops are selling a lot of guns that show up in New York crimes, and are there particular purchasers who buy guns in other states that keep showing up in New York crime scenes. Under current law, I'm only allowed to share that information with our colleagues in law enforcement. Congress stops me and stops the ATF from sharing the information with anyone outside of law enforcement. And there really is no good reason that this information should be secret. Policymakers, the public, the press should be able to see it too. There's nothing in the Second Amendment to prevent us from using that data to make smarter, more informed policy decisions. So Congress should free us up to more widely disseminate this data. Fourth, at the state level, all states should require handgun owners to have a license. Our report clearly shows that New York's gun laws are working. When you have 86% of the handguns used in crimes bought in other states, that tells you the bad guys aren't even trying to get guns in New York. They don't want to go through the permitting requirement. If every state had laws like New York's, we could bring down the level of crime in those states, but also in our own state by making it harder for gun traffickers to operate. And finally, New York State itself must pass the gun kingpin bill to impose severe punishments on anyone who traffics guns into New York. This bill, which is sponsored in the Senate by Senator Jeff Kline and the Assembly by Assemblymember Amy Paulin, would mean that anyone who sells more than 20 illegal guns could face 25 years to life in prison. If you sell more than 20 legal guns, you are not doing this on a casual basis. We've had similar drug laws aimed at drug kingpins that have had a significant deterrent effect. We urge the legislature to pass the gun kingpin bill. This is going to be a top priority for us in the upcoming legislative session. New York has shown leadership in a lot of ways on issues related to gun violence. We have tough gun safety and gun control laws. Our organized crime task force, since I've become Attorney General, has taken hundreds of illegal guns off the street, broken up violent drug gangs and gun dealing gangs that traffic here on Long Island and elsewhere. We've worked with our colleagues in law enforcement successfully, including the Suffolk County Police Department. We've also worked with private sector companies like Facebook to take ads down that were clearly trying to enable illegal gun sales. And as I noted, we've worked with gun show operators to produce the best set of procedures for gun shows to ensure that you get a background check if you purchase a gun at a gun show. But we can't do this alone. No state can do this alone. We need the federal government to step up. We need governments in other states to step up. The data that we're putting in the hands of law enforcement is going to make us all safer. The data that we're making publicly available should enable everyone to join us in demanding that these legislative changes at the federal and state level take place. Without question, the data shows that our strong laws make it harder for criminals to get guns and makes it absolutely clear that no state can solve this problem alone. So we do have something to be proud of in New York. I'm tremendously proud of the work our office did in assembling this data. This has never been made available before in any form to the public, and we look forward to working with our colleagues in law enforcement to drill down on the data to actually start to make trafficking cases. And I know that here in Suffolk County we'll have great partners in that effort with a really unrivaled commitment to doing something about the plague of gun violence, and I'm proud to turn the mic over to one of those great partners in this fight, Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with the Attorney General, and I want to thank him for being here in Suffolk County once again. The Attorney General has been a leader on a number of different issues, and since taking the helm has demonstrated a level of innovation and an ability to bring people together around complex policy issues to help drive them forward. And we've worked together. He's brought initiatives that are really important here in Suffolk County, like the zombie home epidemic, and has brought resources and innovative programs to help us address those issues with the land bank. We've worked together on a number of gun buyback programs. I watched and really was amazed at the work he did in closing the gun show loophole, and where he was able to bring people together. And I think this latest initiative is another example of the kind of leadership that the Attorney General has brought across New York State and, quite frankly, across the country on an issue that is vitally important to us here. And I think the presence of Officer Collins really serves to perfectly highlight the critical nature of that issue. One of our heroes, one of the heroes in our department, but in our country, the police officers who are every day out there, and I get to see what they're doing and the kinds of fights and battles they're taking on every night while everyone else is safely in bed, struck by an illegal firearm. We are grateful for his service. We are grateful for his full recovery and his continued service, excellent service as a member of the Suffolk County Police Department. The gun violence issue is a top priority here in Suffolk County. I can tell you, and I'll be introducing him in a few moments, Police Commissioner Tim Sini has made this a top priority, put forward some really innovative programs here on the local level, and I know we'll be utilizing the data that is coming out of the Attorney General's office now to help advance our efforts here in Suffolk County. And I can say the same for our Chief of Department, Stu Cameron. The report, so I want to thank the Attorney General for a couple of things here. The report that he produced, as he indicated, if we're going to drive things forward as policymakers, we need information. We need real data. And the data provided, the information being provided in this report is critical in terms of making decisions, moving policy forward. And then this analytics platform that will provide ongoing information about the gun issue and where these guns are coming from will help our police department here continue to fight this epidemic on the local level and working with our partners in law enforcement. So my great thanks to the Attorney General once again for being here in Suffolk County and again leading on a critical issue to us here in this county and across the state of New York. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our police commissioner to talk about some of the details of what we're doing here. Commissioner Sini.
I want to thank the Attorney General for this great tool. The Suffolk County Police Department is very excited about using this new tool. It really hits on several of the top priorities of the police department. It's kind of all packaged in one. Utilizing intelligence-led policing, utilizing technology to reduce gun violence in collaboration with our law enforcement partners. So it very nicely encapsulates many of the things that the new leadership team over in the Suffolk County Police Department are focused on. As many of you know, we've launched a number of initiatives to reduce firearm violence. We created the Firearm Suppression Team, which is a unique mix of officers and detectives who have special expertise in developing firearm cases to reduce firearm violence. The results are clear. We are on pace right now to seize a record number of illegal guns from criminals this year. Right now, year to date, we've seized 315 firearms from criminals. That doesn't count the buybacks that we have done as well. So the police department is committed to this goal of reducing firearm violence, removing illegal firearms from the streets. And this tool that the Attorney General has created is going to really open up the possibilities. We're going to utilize this data to work with our state and federal law enforcement partners to target traffickers and really get at the source of the problem here in New York. We have re-engaged our federal law enforcement partners over at the ATF, and they liaison with our firearm suppression team. And I envision that this tool will be a key part of that collaboration. So I want to thank the Attorney General for his leadership and his vision for reducing violent crime, in particular firearm violence in Suffolk County. So again, thank you very much to the Attorney General.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner and Chief and County Executive Ballone, I don't know if you could see the body language from there, but the Commissioner is so intent on this, he's leaning forward into the microphone as he was talking about it. It is tremendously important to understand you've got a team that knows you can't be tough on crime unless you are first smart on crime. And we are fighting a battle now to get evidence and data out there that enables us to tackle the plague of gun violence. It is very important to understand that up until now, ideology has been trumping evidence. And the limitations put on our law enforcement agencies and on federal law enforcement based on ideological beliefs in Washington are impeding our progress. This tool that we launched last week is a huge breakthrough, and the partnership we have here today, you're going to see real results in Suffolk County from this. And now, to close this out, it is a special honor to introduce Police Officer Mark Collins, and he will tell you a little bit about his story. But anyone who meets Officer Collins, anyone who learns about his story and understands where that gun came from, should have no doubt that the recommendations we've made here should be followed through on. Officer.
Good afternoon. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Police Officer Mark Collins of the Suffolk County Police Department. And on March 11, 2015, I was shot twice during a violent struggle with a known gang member, and I came within 3/16 of an inch of being the next line of duty death here in Suffolk County. Thankfully, I'm here today, back at work, in full capacity, protecting the residents of Suffolk County. Excuse me. I know firsthand the dangers of illegal guns in the hands of dangerous people. I feel that any effort here to combat illegal guns is necessary to protect the citizens of Suffolk County. I am proud to represent the Suffolk County Police Department with this extremely worthwhile program. I'm glad to see that we could all come together and fight for a cause that could help protect the police officers and citizens who are out there on a daily basis trying to benefit and make the society that we live in a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now Amy will take questions. If you just identify yourself and your outlet, we're glad to take questions. You can take a look at the tool. Let me see if I've got that data here. We've got, I don't think I have the state-by-state data. We do know in Suffolk and Nassau, the overall trafficking index. For Long Island, and the pattern is very similar to that in neighboring New York City. Of the crime guns that we looked, Florida tops the list of source states with 16% of recoveries, followed by Virginia with 13%, Georgia with 12%. So, and again, consider that when you've got the overwhelming majority of handguns used in crimes coming from other states, those numbers add up. But here, and this is a similar pattern to New York City, Florida, Virginia, and Georgia are the highest states, but Pennsylvania and North and South Carolina also make a contribution.
Attorney General, is your office investigating the death of the Washington Stark man in the Bronx last night by NYPD officers with a taser?
Yes, our investigators have been on the scene. We are conferring with our colleagues in the Bronx DA's office to determine which office has jurisdiction. In a case where an unarmed civilian is killed by a law enforcement officer under the executive order issued by the governor last year, my office supersedes the local district attorney. This is an effort to restore public confidence that there will be a neutral statewide group of investigators and prosecutors investigating the matter. We will make an announcement as soon as we determine if it lies within the parameters of the executive order, and therefore my office will be investigating, and then determining if a prosecution is warranted or if it falls to the Bronx DA. But we are on the scene. Our folks were on the scene last night, our investigators along with the NYPD and people from the Bronx DA's office. Sure. This is a very important aspect of the evolution of the work on how we approach issues of criminal justice policy in this country. And I've been working on this for essentially my entire adult life. But in Washington, there are restraints that were imposed based on an ideology of folks who are afraid that any effort to get data available to law enforcement about guns might erode somehow responsible gun owners' Second Amendment rights. This is not based on any evidence. This is not based on any evidence. I am proud of the fact that we work with responsible gun owners all the time in New York. We work with the New York NRA on issues related to this. Believe me, the rank and file of the NRA and the overwhelming majority of American people, they do not want criminals and people with serious mental health problems to get guns. They want universal background checks. And in New York, we have a great line of communication. In Washington, things have broken down. And for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives not to be able to share this data with law enforcement agencies around the country on its own and with policymakers around the country, I believe is just simply based on ideology trumping evidence. The evidence is what we need. We're not looking to make policy based on anecdotes. We're not looking to make policy based on our fears of what might happen down the road. We want the hard evidence to guide us, and that's what we're doing with this tool. And I'll tell you that there are a lot of colleagues in law enforcement in other states who are very excited about this breakthrough also, because I assure you, the people in these iron pipeline states, they suffer from the same plague or worse plague of gun violence than we do. I mean, New York, relative to other states, is actually pretty safe. I mean, New York City is the safest big city in America. We have smart, good law enforcement agencies. We have good partnerships. But the ideology that has trumped evidence in Washington for far too long is tying the hands of law enforcement to deal with these problems. And Officer Collins and other officers around the country should not have to contend with the ease with which criminals can get their hands on guns because of lax gun laws in other states and because Washington ties the hands of law enforcement.
Nicole, when you say, Mr. Attorney General, how effective do you think our tool is a shot spotter, the gunfire detection tool? Is that a particularly effective tool for fighting gun violence in your mind?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, this is how we get the data we get. I mean, we have the data on almost 53,000 guns recovered at crime scenes in New York State. And While there are some variations around the state, certainly in Suffolk County, they do a very good job of using whatever technology is available to identify guns at crime scenes and to apprehend them. There are a lot of guns that are not recovered, that are lost, and the more information we have, the better our data is and the better our policy decisions making are. So yes, we have to use an all levers approach to this problem. We're not going to ease up on working with our partners in law enforcement to go after gangs and to take guns off the street. We'll have gun buybacks. We will work to ensure that the gun shows in New York are making sure that background checks are conducted. We're going to do everything we can to identify as quickly as possible every crime gun and to seize every crime gun. But now we're taking it to a new level of sophistication. And after this is over, folks from my office are going to be working with the commissioner's team to go over what we can do with the data that's now available. And in the months and years ahead, you will see us continue to make progress on this front. The maddening thing here is we actually know how to solve these problems. We know how to stop criminals in Suffolk County from getting guns that were originally purchased in other states. We have to move forward now and make sure that we're not prevented by the gridlock and dysfunction in Washington from making our citizens safer, and that's what we're taking a big step forward toward today.
Given your endorsement of that shot spotter technology, you said it's a good thing. The county executive recently proposed to cut funding for shot spotter. Is that an unwise decision in your mind?
The county,
Law enforcement needs all the
no,
tools
they do. They do. Our budget gets cut too. I mean, let's not kid ourselves about financing. Could we use more money for our organized crime task force? Sure. Do we have to work within constraints? Absolutely. But one of the reasons we're here today is that by sharing resources and collaborating, we're able to do more with less. I don't even know what the day-to-day ins and outs are of the problems of the budget, but local governments all over New York State are facing tremendous pressure. It makes it all the more important for agencies like mine to, smaller jurisdictions, they don't have the ability to analyze this sort of data. The fact that we were able to spend a year working on this and make it available to all of our colleagues in law enforcement, believe me, there are a lot of jurisdictions that lack anything like the resources or the sophistication that Suffolk County brings to bear on this issue. So, we're always going to have to contend with budget constraints, but that makes it all the more important for us to work together.
Talk about the iron pipeline, which seems to be basically geared down to the south of New York. Is that the epicenter for guns all across the country, or is it something on the west coast of California? Is it all guns basically coming from the south?
No, the patterns are different, but in New York, we've known anecdotally for a long time that guns come up the iron pipeline, which is basically riding up I-95 from Florida through South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. Now we have the actual data to prove that that's true. And it's very important to understand that there is an argument out there that has been advanced by some that, the gun laws in New York City or Chicago don't matter because even though we have tough gun laws, there's still shootings, not in New York City, thankfully, but Chicago's used as a bad example of breakdowns in terms of the number of shootings. This data proves that our gun laws do work. This data proves that because we require permits for handguns in New York State, the bad guys, they aren't even trying to get handguns here. They know that they have to go get them from people who go to Pennsylvania or North Carolina or Florida, and we can now back that up. And when we break here, we're going to be talking with our colleagues, with the county executive, the commissioner, about how we can use this data together to actually make cases and going forward have something other than just anecdotal evidence. This is the first time we've had that. We have the hard data, and we're going to be able to start doing something about gun trafficking in a way we never have before. Okay.
In May, you asked for DA Thomas Bolton to step down from his post and said you would ask the governor to remove him if he didn't. It's been months. Have you asked the governor to remove DA Bolton from his post?
I think there's an ongoing federal investigation into the matter. I think if you look at the sentencing memo that the U.S. Attorney's Office put in on the Burke case, I think you'll see clearly indications there that the investigation is continuing, and we're going to wait to see the results of that investigation.
Your former police chief, Burke, who was sentenced yesterday to 46 months in federal prison, you appointed him, you endorsed him. You were noticeably quiet yesterday when he was sentenced. What are your thoughts now seeing him sentenced
Well, I don't think you called me, Nicole, first of all. Look, yesterday was the sentencing of somebody who, as the U.S. Attorney's Office has clearly indicated, was engaged with other high officials here in Suffolk County in a massive cover-up. I think the investigation in that matter is ongoing. It is important to Suffolk County and to law enforcement here that continue and that we reach a culmination so that this county can move forward.
What's the wreaked havoc?
Yeah, I'll talk to you on the side.
Are there any
Yeah.
other questions on the guns report?
There's the Attorney General here.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
guys.
Thank you.
thank you.